All right, guys, today we're going to move on to the topic of matrix multiplication. And I want to start the way we've started with the other subjects of addition and subtraction. Really talk about what are the circumstances that you have to have in order to multiply matrices. Because again, with addition and subtraction, you remember what we said is they have to have the same exact dimensions. One of the first things I've told you that you needed to do was to look at those dimensions and see if they can in fact be added or subtracted, right? So let's start kind of that same way, and I guess we'll go into this with this same mentality of maybe that's the same case with multiplication. And so what I want to do, I want to look at number 2 here first, and I've got a reason for doing this. But I want to look at number 2 first. And if you notice, let's go ahead and define what the dimensions are. So you notice I've got 1, 2, 3 rows. I always do rows times columns. So 3 rows times 2 columns. So a 3 by 2. Okay. And you notice here as well, I have 3 rows and 2 columns. So far, so good. I've got a 3 by 2 times a 3 by 2. Now, again, if I were talking about addition and subtraction, I'd say, okay, I can go ahead and do this. I just take 4 plus a -1 or minus a -1, whatever operation I'm doing. So if I've got multiplication, one would think, well, I just need to take 4 times -1, and that's going to make me a new matrix over here. And I'm going to take -1 times 3, and that's going to give me another element over here. And I'm going to end up with a 3 by 2 matrix. That's what one would think. But let's see if that actually pans out. So what I want to do, I'm going to switch over to the Desmos matrix calculator, and I'm going to put this same 2 matrices in here, and we're going to try to do the multiplication and see what happens. Remember, we've got a 3 by 2 times a 3 by 2. We know what we think it ought to do, but let's see what actually happens. So I'm going to go over here to the Desmos calculator. Again, you know that you're on the Desmos matrix calculator when you see matrix up here on the top, as well as you see you've got new matrix right here. Of course, I'll put this link in the description as well so that you've got that. But let's go ahead and do a new matrix, and we'll just call it A. And again, we had a 3 by 2. So I'm going to change this to a 3 by 2. And I'm just going to go ahead and put these numbers in here real quick. We'll call that first matrix that we saw matrix A and -3. So now I want to do another new matrix. This one we'll call matrix B, and again we're going to do 3 rows by 2 columns. And I'm going to go ahead and put in the other matrix here: -1, 3, 4, -6, 4, and -3. So now I have my 2 matrices, right? Now I just need to put in a new line and see what happens here. So let's go ahead and hit enter. It gives us a new line right here. And remember, I want to take matrix A, and I'm going to multiply that times matrix B. And if I hit enter, it gives me this little triangle. And notice what it says: cannot multiply matrices with incompatible dimensions. Now, wait a minute. We could only add or subtract matrices if they were exactly the same dimensions. Yet, now it's telling me that this cannot be multiplied. Let's go back to our original sheet that we looked at, and notice our instructions here. It says simplify and write undefined for expressions that are undefined. Well, my calculator basically just told me I can't do this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead beside of this one, and I'm going to write undefined. It cannot be done. I still don't really understand that because these are exactly the same dimensions. Why would it not do it? So now let's go down here to number 6. Again, I've got some reason for this. Let's look at number 6 because we just figured out that these two, even though they were the same, they could not be multiplied, which is kind of weird. Now I'm going to go down to this one. So this one I have 2 rows times 3 columns, so it's a 2 by 3. And here I have 1, 2, 3 rows and 2 columns, so it's a 3 by 2. Now all convention would tell us, well, we can't really multiply that because that's totally different. I guess it's kind of opposite, right? Because you got a 2 by 3 and here you got a 3 by 2. Well, again, let's give it a try. Let's see what happens. So We go back over to the matrix calculator again. I'm going to go ahead and clear all. That way we just got a clear starting point. I'm going to go back and do a matrix A. And remember the first one we did was a 2 by 3. So we'll go ahead and change that to a 2 by 3. 5, 5, negative 6. And I'm just typing in the matrices that are a part of number 6. So these you're going to already have done. You're welcome. So those we have finished. We're going to go ahead and hit new matrix. And remember this second matrix was a 3 by 2. So I'm going to change that to a 3 by 2. Negative 1, 1, negative 4, 1, 3, and negative 2. There are my two matrices. And remember, I'm going to come down, hit this blue return button right here. And that's just going to kind of set those in there for me. And now I'm going to try to multiply them. So I'm going to take matrix A times matrix B. And lo and behold, I get an answer. This one actually gives me an answer. So I have negative 43 and 22 in the first row. I have negative 46 and 22 in the second row. So let's look back at this again, because this is really getting weird at this point, even spooky. We just finished the Halloween season. So here you go. Here's your math horror here. So now we've got two that are exactly the same that are undefined. Here we have two that are kind of like the opposite, but yet they give us an answer. Which, again, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because look at this as well. This did not end up being a 2 by 3 or a 3 by 2. It ended up being a 2 by 2. I wonder how that happened, because if I took each individual piece like I was thinking before and multiplied them out, that would give me a totally different matrix than what this would, right? Either this calculator's gone crazy or it's actually doing what we need it to do. Let's try a couple more examples. I know this might get a little bit lengthy, but it's okay. So now let's look at number 5 right here. And you notice, let's talk about the dimensions. This is 1 row by 3 columns, so it's a 1 by 3. And this one is a 2 by 3, okay? Now, it worked over here with a 2 by 3. Maybe it'll work over here. So again, let's do what we've been doing already. Let's see if this works out. So I'm going to go back to my matrix calculator. I know we're bouncing back and forth, but it's okay. So I'm going to clear all. I'm going to start with a new matrix, and my first one was a 1 by 3. So 1 by 3. And let's go ahead and type those in, negative 4, 0, and 6. We're going to do a new matrix. Our second matrix was a 2 by 3. So let's do 2 by 3. 2, 5, and 2 is my first row. My second row is negative 6, 2, and negative 5. Now I've got my two matrices. I'm going to go ahead and lock those in. And now I'm ready to see if it's going to multiply. Hopefully it will, right? Let's try it. There's no way to know except to try it. So A times B, and notice right away it gives it to me again. Cannot multiply matrices with incompatible dimensions. Well, what in the world makes up incompatible dimensions? Because these were incompatible or undefined, yet these were not. They come with an answer. This one now is telling me that it is undefined. What in the world is going on here? I want to go through one more example real quick, number 1, and I want us to see if we can figure this out. Okay, this is a little bit of a journey for us here to figure out when they can be multiplied and when they can't. So we're going to clear this out, and we're going to start out with a new matrix. All right, new matrix. Again, let me go back. I did not do this. I didn't do what I said I would always do, and that is to define what this is. So you notice this is a 2 by 2, okay? This one is a 2 by 3. So I've got a 2 by 2 that I'm trying to multiply times a 2 by 3. So we got to try to figure out whether this is actually going to work or not. So here we go. We go back to our matrix calculator. I'm going to go ahead and do my first new matrix, which is a 2 by 2. That's already kind of set up for me. 4, 4, 2, and negative 1. All right, let's do a new matrix. And this one was a 2 by 3. Now, a while ago that worked, a 2 by 3. Maybe it'll work this time. Then, of course, we did another example. It didn't work at all. Let's try it. 3, -1, -6. Second row, 6, -1, and 2. Again, we're going to lock those in. We have A and B in there. Let's go ahead and see if we can multiply A times B. And I want you to look what happened. Here we go again, where it is giving us an answer. All right, so I'm going to write this down real quick. We got 36, -8. We got -16. And on our second row, we have 0, -1, -14. So let's go back real quick, and here's kind of like the finale. We're looking at what's actually happening here, okay? So what I want you to notice is, this is one we started with, same dimensions, undefined. This one is undefined. Well, what made these two available? And I want to do one more little thing before I say that. Look at what this ended up being. It ended up being 2 rows by 3. It ended up being a 2 by 3 as an answer, okay? So what in the world is different about these two that is different than these two? Because these two would not give me an answer. It says it's undefined. It says it can't do it, but yet these two did. Okay, here's what I want you to notice. I want you to notice this about these matrices. Look at this one that actually did work out. And here's what you need to look for, okay? You're going to do the same thing you've been doing with adding and subtracting. You're going to go ahead and do your dimensions first thing, okay? Because this is really going to tell you whether you can multiply them or not. Here's what I want you to notice. Look at these inner numbers. Look at the columns in this first matrix versus the rows in the second matrix. Do you notice that they're the same? They both have a 3. Notice right here, we have a 2 as my column, and here I have a 2 as my row. And you'll notice that both of those problems right there, they come up with an answer, okay? These, if we look at them, we had a 2 and we had a 3. So they're not the same, okay? They're not the same. Same here. I had a 3 and a 2. They are not the same. And so if you've got to compare the columns in the first matrix and the rows in the second matrix, and they have to be the same before you can multiply. If these two numbers are not the same, they cannot be multiplied, and you might as well just write undefined because it's not going to work. Again, you could go through the trouble of typing it into matrix calculator. I wouldn't encourage that because it takes time. But just by looking at those two values, you can tell whether they're going to be able to be multiplied or not. Here's where it gets even spookier. Are you ready for this? Notice these outside numbers is a 2 and a 2. And notice what my answer ended up coming out as, a 2 by 2. Okay? So not only does this tell you whether you can multiply it or not, it also tells you what your answer is going to be. Notice this was a 2 by 2. Notice this one, my outside numbers was a 2 by 3, and that's exactly what my answer ended up being. Again, I told you this was a little spooky, okay? But hopefully you can understand now how and when you can multiply matrices. Now, we could go through the trouble of showing you how to multiply these by hand. What I'm going to do real quick is I'm just going to show you one example, and this is going to be enough for you to really appreciate what your matrix calculator is doing, okay? So this right here is, in fact, one problem, okay? Now look, this is the start of the problem right here. All of these steps right here is what you have to do in order to multiply a matrix. Look, I'm even going to go to the second page. All of that, ladies and gentlemen, is what you have to do to multiply these by hand. Now, lucky for you, I'm not going to ask you to multiply these by hand because it's not as simple as just taking this number times that number. You actually have to, look here, you've got some addition you've got to do. It's a whole big, long, arduous process, okay? So instead of trying to get you to figure out how to do this by hand, I just want you to be able to tell by looking at the dimensions whether you can multiply or not, and then be able to use the matrix calculator to be able to go ahead and finish it out, okay? So that's really your mission today, is to finish the rest of these out. There is 2 pages to this, okay? But again, one of the first things I would encourage you to do, I want you to hear me on this video. The first thing I would encourage you to do is to go through here and do these dimensions. For example, this one is 2 by 1, right? 2 by 1. This one is a 1 by 3. Now I'm going to ask you, can you multiply those? Well, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look at these inner two numbers, and they're both 1. So guess what? You can multiply those. And what is your answer going to end up being? It's going to end up being a 2 by 3. So you're going to have a 2 by 3 matrix. That's going to be the answer that's going to go right here. Okay? But again, that's the first thing you want to do, because some of these, I'll go ahead and tell you right now, are going to be undefined. They're not going to be able to be done. So you need to do that first, then go to the matrix calculator and allow it to do all the heavy lifting for you. Okay? So if you need any help, obviously get in touch with us and let us know, and we will do our best to try to give you some additional help on this subject.